"You're not even half the woman my mother is," my daughter-in-law spat, her voice icy. I froze, then slowly pushed my chair back. Those words hit me like a cold blade, cutting straight to the heart. The voice belonged to no one but my daughter-in-law, Melissa Carter. That night, right at the dinner table I'd spent the whole day preparing, she looked me dead in the face, smiled that smug little smile, and then she said it. The room went silent. My heart was pounding. My hand holding the spoon trembled so hard the pudding wobbled. I looked over at my son, Daniel Harper, hoping he'd stand up, defend me, stop her. But he bowed his head and avoided my eyes. My chest tightened and my throat felt like it was closing up. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I shoved my chair back, braced my hands on the table, and with a voice that shook but cut through the quiet, I said, "Fine. Then let your mother pay the rent." The words had barely left my mouth before Daniel went white. He jumped up so fast his glass tipped and spilled across the tablecloth. "What rent? What are you talking about?" he yelled, looking at me as if I'd started speaking a foreign language. Melissa's swagger vanished in an instant, her sneer replaced by something like confusion and fear. I drew a slow breath and looked them both in the eye. "The rent for the apartment I've been quietly paying for 6 months. $900 a month plus transfer fees. Rounded up to $1,000. That money came from my savings, paid on the 5th of every month. I used the lifetime I'd saved for to support you two." The clock on the wall was the only sound left. Daniel stammered, "Mom, you told me to tell you the landlord let us defer." I looked at him, my eyes burning, my voice firm. "Yes, I lied. I lied to spare you the shame. You asked me to keep it secret because you didn't want your wife to know. But really, Daniel, you were protecting your image." Melissa sat frozen, eyes wide, lips trembling. She hadn't even found a word to defend herself when something rose up inside me, a strength I hadn't known I had. 6 months I skipped buying things for my aching joints. 6 months I tightened my belt so I could save. And here, at my own table, in my own house, my daughter-in-law could spit venom like that. That night I knew, with all of me, that my life would never be the same. It all began 6 months earlier. That day, Daniel showed up at my house looking like a shadow of himself. The moment I saw him, my heart clenched. His eyes were red and swollen as if he'd been crying. His hair was a mess, his shirt wrinkled, his face gaunt. He dropped into the kitchen chair, his hands trembling as they twisted together like they might break apart at any second. "Mom." His voice was hoarse, cracked as if caught in his throat. I lost my job. We don't have enough to pay the rent anymore." The words fell heavy as he bowed his head, his shoulders shaking. I watched his lips press tightly together, fighting to hold back. But the tears broke free anyway, dripping onto the wooden table. My chest ached as if something were squeezing it tight. In that moment, Daniel wasn't a 35-year-old man. He was once again the little boy who used to run home crying when kids at school picked on him, or when he failed a test, crawling into my arms for comfort. My hand trembled as I reached out to his shoulder, hearing him sob. "Mom, just a few months. Lend me the money. I'll find another job right away. I'll pay you back. I swear, please believe me." His voice wavered like it was about to shatter, desperate and pleading. He clutched my hand, his eyes drowning in tears like a man going under, clinging to driftwood. In that instant, I couldn't think of anything else. All I could do was nod, my own eyes stinging, my heart breaking, because no matter how old he was, no matter what mistakes he'd made, he was still my son. And as his mother, how could I possibly turn away from his plea? I knew I was old, my health was failing. My hands trembled more each day, my joints ached through the nights, and my steps were no longer steady. Still, inside my closet, I kept a small nest egg, every penny I'd managed to save over a lifetime. That money came from years as a seamstress. Every stitch, every wedding dress I embroidered, every suit I tailored for a groom, every tablecloth rented and sewn with a pattern. It all added up. It wasn't much by anyone's measure, but to me it was the sum of a life of hard work and patience. So that day, without hesitation, I took that money out and used it to cover my son and daughter-in-law's rent. My chest ached when I handed it over. But there was also a strange lightness, because I thought I was pulling them through a hard patch. Daniel gripped my hand. His was still warm like when he was a boy, and he spoke so quietly as if afraid someone might hear. "Mom, please don't tell Melissa. This is our secret. I don't want my wife to be embarrassed." I nodded without a second thought. I felt proud and tender, thinking my son wanted to protect his wife's dignity. I wanted to believe he was being thoughtful. Only later did I realize he wasn't protecting Melissa so much as protecting his own pride. And this old mother of his willingly shouldered that pride on her bent shoulders. Month after month, I went to the bank on the 5th of every month and transferred $900 to the landlord. Some months I skipped my joint medicine because I couldn't afford it. Some weeks I ate nothing but rice and eggs and pickled vegetables. There were days I looked at my shoes and saw the toes worn through, and I held back from buying new ones. All of it, the small humiliations, the tightened belt, was for a roof over my son and daughter-in-law's heads. I believed, foolishly perhaps, that one day they would be grateful. Life, however, can be cruelly ironic. While I pinched every penny and ate frugally, they carried on as if nothing was wrong. Neighbors told me they saw Melissa at the spa and Daniel leading her into fancy restaurants. They still shopped for bags and dresses and even talked about taking a vacation. I clenched my teeth and kept quiet, thinking only that their stability mattered. But inside, each bit of sacrifice felt like a new cut. I was giving until I had nothing left, and they acted as though nothing at all had happened. That evening, I decided to make a special dinner. I cooked Daniel's childhood favorite, chicken with mushroom sauce, added vegetable rice to balance it out, and for dessert, vanilla pudding, the very one that used to make him beam and say, "Mom, you're the best cook ever." I set the table carefully, brought out the crystal glasses my mother had left me, polished the silverware I'd kept tucked away for years. All I wanted was a warm family meal, just to see my son smile again. The moment Melissa stepped into my house, though, my heart tightened. She wore a blazing red dress that seemed to outshine the lamps in the living room. On her feet were glossy high heels. Just one glance, and I knew the price could cover my groceries for a month. Her hair was styled in perfect curls, lips painted a striking scarlet, her perfume thick in the air. She hadn't come to blend in or share kindness. She came to flaunt, to dominate. Her eyes swept across the home I had lived in for over 30 years, every corner filled with memories. Yet in her gaze, I saw only disdain. She tilted her chin and, in a sharp, superior tone, said, "Evelyn, don't you think it's time to update this house? Just look at it. So old." My mother's place is gorgeous, minimalist, modern, very much in style. Her words weren't advice. They were judgment spoken from above. In praising her own mother, she trampled on the pride I had poured into every detail of my home. I stood still, listening to her snobbish tone, every word landing like a blade against my heart. Daniel sat there, eyes glued to his phone as if he could crawl into it, refusing to meet my gaze. I swallowed my frustration, telling myself, he's just embarrassed in front of his wife. It will be better once dessert comes. I went to the kitchen and carried out the tray of pudding. The dessert Daniel once adored, the one that used to make him exclaim, "I was the best cook in the world." I set each bowl gently on the table, quietly hoping for a simple word of thanks, some small kindness to ease the heavy air. But no. Before I could even sit, Melissa lifted her chin, her painted lips curling into a thin smile, her eyes flashing with deliberate scorn. Then she spoke, each word crisp, sharp, tearing through the room like a blade. "You're not even half the woman my mother is." The sentence struck me square in the heart. I froze, my hand shaking so badly the spoon nearly slipped from the bowl. My mind went blank, the phrase, "not even half," echoing like a cruel refrain. Daniel stayed bowed over, silent as stone. No protest, no defense, not even a glance in my direction. His silence hurt more than her insult, and that was the moment I had to rise. There was no room left for patience. The secret I had carried for half a year, the one I thought I'd bury to keep peace, surged up like fire. I lifted my head, my voice trembling but hard as steel. "Then let your mother pay the rent." The room collapsed into silence, the only sound my heartbeat pounding like it would tear through my chest. And in that instant, everything began to change. The air in the room was so thick you could hear the second hand on the wall clock tick. Daniel slumped into his chair, his hands clutching his head. Melissa stared, powdered face streaked with shock. I looked at them both and felt a hurt that words could hardly hold. For 6 months I'd skipped meals, gone without new clothes, even missed taking my joint medicine. Everything to keep a decent roof over their heads. And now, in my own home, I was being disrespected. I swallowed hard. Tears pricked my eyes as my voice trembled and slowed. "Do you know what I had to do last week?" I said. I sold the wedding ring your father gave me more than 40 years ago. That ring, it's the most precious thing I have. I kept it like I kept my heart. Every time I opened that box, I thought of the days your father was well, sitting beside me, smiling, holding my hand and promising to be with me for the rest of our lives. And yet I had to bite my lip and sell it. Not because I don't cherish the memory, not because it meant nothing, but because I needed money. Money to pay your rent. My chest tightened and every word scraped my throat. My eyes blurred as my husband's old voice echoed in my head. "Keep it. It's proof of our love." And yet I sold it. Not for myself, but so my son and daughter-in-law could have a home. The pain was a bitter knot in my gut. Daniel raised his head, eyes red. "Mom, you sold the wedding ring?" His voice broke, but I saw no real remorse in him. Melissa sat frozen, her eyes darting as if she couldn't believe what she'd heard. My tone sharpened as I went on. "Yes, I sold the wedding ring for cash, paid the landlord, so you two would have a place to stand tall while I eat rice with pickles and endure the nights of aching joints. And today, my daughter-in-law can sit here in a dress that cost hundreds, in shiny heels, and tell me I'm not even half the woman her mother is." Daniel bowed his head against the table, voice shaking. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know it had come to this." But Melissa leaped up, slamming her hand on the table. "What else have you been hiding from me, Daniel? Huh? Is what your mother says true? That she's been paying rent for 6 months? You told me the landlord gave us an extension, that everything was fine. You let me spend, let me shop, let me plan spa days and vacations, while we were actually living off her money?" Her bright lipstick streaked with tears now, the proud cry turned into panic. She demanded of her husband with anger and accusation. "Did you lose your job? What else are you hiding?" Daniel sat pale, knuckles white, sweat pouring down his temples. He breathed like each inhale squeezed his throat. Then suddenly he leapt up and shouted, his voice raw and explosive in that heavy room. "Yes! I lost my job 2 weeks ago." His voice broke. Equal parts fury and fear, like a man pressed up against a wall with no escape. He clutched his head, hair in disarray, eyes bloodshot, and then, voice choked and on the verge of tears, he said, I couldn't tell you. I knew if you heard, you'd go mad. You'd look at me with that contempt and leave me. I was so afraid, so I pretended. I pretended everything was fine, that I was still working, that I had a paycheck. So you could keep spending, go to the spa, buy what you wanted, so we could keep the life you wanted. He trembled, his fingers digging into the chair until it creaked, then bowed his head, voice small and bitter and pathetic. I thought I'd keep lying for a few more days and then lie some more until I found another job. But I can't hide it anymore. At that, Daniel collapsed back into the chair, shoulders shaking like a child caught stealing, hands covering his face as sobs choked the room. Little broken sounds swallowed by the leaden silence. Melissa shot up so violently her chair crashed to the floor with a thud. Her face flushed crimson, her eyes blazing, her hands trembling with rage. She shrieked, her voice sharp and cutting, each word hurled at Daniel like a slap across the face. "You've lost your mind, Daniel. You let me spend money like water while we didn't have a dime to our names? What do you take me for? You made me a joke, an idiot, for everyone to laugh at." Then she swung her finger toward me, jabbing the air, trembling with fury as though she could pierce the heavy silence itself. Her painted lips quivered, the red lipstick smeared, and though her voice cracked, the venom was still there. So that Melissa nearly screamed, her eyes burning with hatred. "So that she could sit back and smirk at me behind my back, isn't that right? You've humiliated me like this, Daniel." Each word tore through the house, ripping apart what little peace remained. In her contemptuous glare, Melissa wasn't just attacking her husband. She was shifting all the shame onto me as if the truth being laid bare was my plot, my scheme to disgrace her. My blood felt like it was boiling. I slammed my hand down on the table so hard the whole room shook. That's enough. Both of you! Aren't you ashamed? One of you is weak and unemployed and lied to both your wife and your mother. The other is selfish, spending money recklessly and showing contempt for the woman who spent her whole life caring for her son. Bravo. Both of you are really something. Daniel broke down, crying like a child. I'm sorry, Mom. I was wrong. I didn't want you to suffer like this, he wailed. Melissa stayed furious, turning on him. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you make me look like an idiot? You're a useless man. I cut in, each word measured and sharp. Stop blaming each other. You're both at fault. A 35-year-old son who lets his 70-year-old mother sell her wedding ring, skip her medicine, skip meals to support you. A daughter-in-law who lives off that money while looking down on her benefactor. Both of you need to take a hard look at yourselves. The room fell into silence, broken only by muffled sobs. I could see the deception stripped away. Daniel weak and dependent, Melissa wrapped up in herself and never thinking of anyone but her own wants. Me? I was wrong too, for spoiling them, for believing unconditional love would make them grow up. The truth was, I had become a crutch they never learned to let go of. I breathed in deeply and stood. My voice was slow but resolute. Starting tomorrow, I won't pay another cent. That apartment, that rent. You two take care of it. If Melissa truly believes her mother is better than me, let her pay. If Daniel wants to be a husband, a man, then stand up and be one. I've lived 70 years. I am not your bank anymore. Melissa gaped, eyes rimmed red, and Daniel crumpled as if he'd been handed a verdict. I turned away, my heart heavy but also strangely light, because I knew then this decision was final. That night I lay in my familiar room, the yellow lamp casting shadows over walls, stained with old memories. On my pillow I stayed still, letting memories rush in like an unstoppable tide. I thought of Edward Harper, my late husband, and the years we held each other's hands, shared every meal, and built this home together. I thought of the wedding ring that once glittered on my finger, now gone, leaving only a cold hollow, a keepsake lost like a piece of my heart sold away to the world. Then the image of Daniel as a child came back to me. The night he ran a high fever and I sat up through the dark, holding him and praying the heat would pass. The day he graduated wearing his cap and gown, head held high while I stood at the back of the hall with tears of pride streaming down my face. I believed then that every sacrifice had been worth it. And now, today, that same son sat with his head on the kitchen table, sobbing like a child when the truth came out. I looked at him and my heart ached, part tenderness, part sorrow, and underneath it all a new kind of pain. The pain of betrayal, of being used, of living in the shadow of my son's pretended life. I realized something I'd never dared to face in 70 years. A mother's love is not an excuse to be exploited forever. Loving someone does not mean being blind. Sacrifice is not the same as accepting contempt. That dinner, marked by my daughter-in-law's cruel words and my son's weak silence, ended an era. It ended the days of unconditional spoiling. It ended the quiet withdrawals from my savings each month to prop up a hollow pride. That night, in the hush of my room, I spoke a sentence that felt like a verdict I gave to both my life and theirs. Starting tomorrow, I won't pay a single cent. Those words rang in my head, firm, cold, and unbearably painful. I knew the moment I said them, I had cut the rope that had tied me for so many years. I knew then that from that point on, everything would change. Not just for Daniel and Melissa, but for the rest of my days. Daniel sat dazed, his eyes bloodshot. Melissa still stood there, her makeup streaked, her expression a messy mix of confusion and fury. I looked at them both, my heart aching, and yet a strange lightness crept in, as if I had finally set down a burden I'd carried for years. I sat back down, placed my hands on the table, and spoke with a calm I didn't quite recognize. For 70 years, I have lived for other people. As a child, I lived to please my parents. As an adult, I lived for my husband, Edward Harper. After he died, I lived for my son, Daniel. Every penny, every drop of sweat, every sleepless night. I gave it all to this family. But has anyone, any of you, ever asked what I wanted? Has anyone ever asked at this age what my dreams are? My voice cracked. I looked down at my own worn, calloused hands. Hands that had stitched thousands of dresses, that had held my son's small ones when he was afraid, now trembling from age and illness. I sighed. I let my whole life pass without ever truly living for myself. Daniel lifted his head, eyes rimmed red. "Mom, I know I was wrong. I promise I'll change. I'll find a job. I raised my hand to stop him. My tone was stern but no longer angry. "No, Daniel, I don't want to hear more promises. What I need now isn't to keep carrying you. For the first time, I want to live like someone who has the right to pursue happiness. I'd rather live alone in this house with memories of your father than keep being humiliated and disrespected in the home I protected." Melissa let out a scoffing laugh, shaky and small. "Alone? Do you think you can bear the loneliness? At 70, what do you even hope for?" I looked at her steadily. "You're wrong, Melissa. It's because of today that I realize I still have the right to start over at 70. You think old age is only counting days and waiting for pity from children. I refuse that." I paused, then said slowly, my words cutting through the heavy air, "Do you know, just last week someone called me. Someone I hadn't heard from in 40 years. Richard Lawson." The room went immediately quiet. Daniel snapped his head up. Melissa frowned. I smiled, small and surprised that I could still smile after all these years. Richard was my first love back in college. He moved to the U.S. to make a life, and I stayed and married your father. We lost touch. After all these years, he found me on social media. For the past 2 weeks, we've talked every evening. Richard told me about his life, the engineering company he built in Seattle, his 3 grown children, and the loneliness he's felt since his wife passed 2 years ago. Daniel stammered, "Mom, you mean the man in those old photos, the one who gave you the red scarf? That Richard?" I nodded, my gaze distant. "Yes, the man who once promised to show me the Pacific Ocean, who promised we'd write a book about ordinary life together. And now, after 40 years, he told me, 'Evelyn, I want to know what the girl I loved back then has become. Come to Seattle. Let me take you to the ocean, meet my children, and let us have some happy days together.'" Melissa gaped, voice sharp. "Are you kidding? At your age and dreaming of following a stranger to Seattle? Do you know people can scam you? Are you really going to drop everything to chase an old romance?" I laughed then, a bitter, decisive laugh. "Melissa, compared to the lies your husband and you told me, what could Richard Lawson possibly deceive me about? If he did deceive me, I would still have tried living for myself once. Here, in this house, I'm treated like an ATM, a woman to be scorned. I won't have that anymore." Daniel rushed in, panicked. "Mom, you can't go. You don't know what kind of man he is after 40 years. What if he's only saying what you want to hear? What if he hurts you?" I looked at my son, and this time my eyes were not angry but resolute. "Daniel, don't speak to me about fear. I've lived under fear for decades. Fear you would lack. Fear you'd be unhappy. Fear you'd be looked down upon. I let that fear steer me for too long. Now I am not afraid. I'd rather risk disappointment than remain buried in shame. I've decided this time I will live for myself." Melissa sank into a chair, tears flowing, half angry, half terrified. "No, no way. If you go, we lose our support. If you go, what will we do?" I met her gaze coldly. "Yes, if I leave, you will have to fend for yourselves. And that needs to happen. You've relied on me for too long. It's time to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Daniel trembled. "Mom, are you really going to Seattle?" I nodded, and for the first time in 70 years, my eyes shone with something new. Freedom. "Yes, Daniel, I'm going. I will see Richard again. I will stand by the Pacific I dreamed of in my youth. I will live for myself for the first time." The room fell utterly still. I knew that decision stunned them, and it marked a turning point for me. That night I looked honestly at my past, the years I had lived for others, and chose, from now on, I will live for myself. The chance fate offered. Richard Lawson. I would grasp it with whatever courage I had left. After that fateful dinner, the air in my house was different. I no longer slipped off to the bank to cover their rent. I no longer clenched my teeth and skipped medicine or meals to keep them afloat. It was as though I had finally set down the enormous weight I had carried on my back for decades. But what surprised me most wasn't the change in myself. It was the change in Daniel, the son I thought had collapsed completely under his wife's grip and his own lies. In the days following that night, Daniel didn't show up at my door with pleading eyes or angry demands. There were no phone calls filled with complaints, no shadow hovering around to lean on me again. Instead, he disappeared for a few days, leaving behind an odd emptiness in me, a mixture of worry and relief. Then one morning, as sunlight streamed through the curtains, I heard a soft knock at the door. When I opened it, there he was. Daniel looked thinner, his shirt wrinkled, his dark pants marked with dust, the heels of his shoes worn down. His face was hollow, his chin rough with stubble, his hair unkempt as if he hadn't bothered with a comb in days. But in his eyes, those eyes that once only held exhaustion and avoidance, there flickered a faint light. A spark, I thought, had long since gone out. He sat down in the same kitchen chair he used to sit in as a boy while I sewed, the same chair where I once kept watch over him as he studied. His voice was hesitant, trembling, but honest. "Mom, I found a job. Not an office one, not like before. I'm on the night shift for a cleaning company. The pay is low, the work is hard, but at least it's honest." I stared at him for a long moment. In my mind, I saw the boy who had grown accustomed to air-conditioned rooms, sipping coffee while talking about grand projects. And now here he was, holding a broom, scrubbing floors, hauling garbage bags. My heart tightened with a mix of sorrow and pity. But strangely, I didn't feel ashamed of him. I didn't even feel the urge to coddle him. Instead, there was a fragile but real sense of hope stirring in me. I nodded slowly, my voice calm and firm. "Good. It doesn't matter what you do, as long as it's honest. When you earn money with your own hands, that's when it has meaning." Daniel lowered his head, his lips trembling as if fighting a smile. Then, in a voice quiet and unlike the evasive tones of the past, he continued, "I also went to the community center. They have free counseling there. I signed up. The doctor said I've lived with a habit of dependence, always like a child waiting for someone else to rescue me. I need to learn how to take responsibility for myself." He paused, drawing in a deep breath, then went on, as though pouring out something he'd been holding for days. "I also registered for some online accounting courses. It's not much, but I want to learn a real trade. So one day you won't have to be disappointed in me anymore." At those words, my throat closed up. For years, I had longed to hear such things from him. The words of a man, not a child clinging to his mother's sleeve. Tears threatened to rise, but I swallowed them down, keeping my voice steady. "Yes, as long as you truly mean it, I couldn't ask for anything more." In that moment, I saw two sides of my son at once. The fragile boy I had always known, and the man just beginning to emerge, tentative but determined, taking the first steps on the path of adulthood. A path he should have walked long ago. The day I left finally came. That morning was sharp with a coolness in the air, a soft breeze moving through the trees along the road. Daniel arrived early, different from any other time. He wore an old shirt and carried a small bouquet of white chrysanthemums, my favorite since I was young. I stood there stunned. It had been so long since anyone brought me flowers. He stepped forward and handed them to me, his voice thick. "Mom, these are the flowers you like. I want you to take them, so when you're on the plane, you'll remember there's someone here who loves you." I held the bouquet to my chest and felt my hands tremble. Such a small gesture, but to me it was a whole sky of comfort. Daniel was different that day. He wasn't the crying boy begging me to save him, nor the man who bowed his head and let his wife lead him around. He stood before me thin and awkward, but at least he was looking at himself. We went to the airport together. On the ride, he told me about the job, the nights spent mopping floors, the smell of cleaners, the quiet jokes of the hard-working people he worked beside. He told me about his sessions at the community center with a counselor, how he'd finally said the words, "I've been used to letting Mom carry everything." He admitted it had become a kind of addiction, the addiction to being rescued. But now he wanted to stop. He wanted to stand up for himself. At the airport, he helped me with my suitcase, checked me in, and stayed with me all the way to the security gate. Before we parted, he pressed an envelope into my hand. "Mom, this is a letter I wrote. Don't open it now. Open it when the plane takes off. It's easier for me to write than to say." I hugged him, truly hugged him, for the first time in years, not as someone who clings to my shoulder, but as two people learning to let go at the right moment. I smoothed the hair from his forehead like when he was little. "I believe in you, Daniel. This time I really do." Once I was seated on the plane and the engines grew louder, I opened the envelope with shaky hands. Inside were loose-lined pages. His handwriting was the same crooked script from his school days, but every line tightened my chest. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about the years that passed. I remember being a child with fevers while you stayed up all night by my bedside. I remember graduation mornings and you wiping your eyes when I walked into the hall. I remember when I wanted that bicycle and you sold your brand new sewing machine so you could buy it for me. I remember the dinners where you gave me all the meat and ate rice with fish sauce yourself. I remember everything, but I never said thank you. I took everything for granted. I thought you were a superhero, tireless, needing no love. Now I understand. You are not a superhero. You are a woman with a heart bigger than anyone I know. You are my quiet hero. I'm sorry for turning your love into chains that bound you. I'm sorry you had to sell your wedding ring, the most precious thing you had, so we could keep a roof over our heads. I'm sorry I sat silent while my wife insulted you. Mom, when you stood up and said, 'I'd rather live alone than be humiliated,' that was the first time I saw you stand up for yourself. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you found the courage to let go. Go to Seattle. See Richard Lawson again. Live like a woman who has the right to dream, to love, to be happy. I will not hold on. I will learn to live my life. Your son, Daniel." Reading that, my eyes blurred and the paper was wet with tears. But they weren't tears of pain now. They were tears of pride and happiness. All the years I'd waited for this moment. The moment my son could stand up, speak honestly, and finally see me as more than a shadow of sacrifice had come. The plane shuddered, rolled, and then lifted. I sat back, the letter in my hands, watching the blue open up through the window. Below lay the city where I had lived my whole life, full of its sorrows and the years of my burdens. Ahead of me was a new journey. I whispered to myself like a promise, "Evelyn Harper, this time you will live for yourself." The plane climbed, higher and higher, carrying the dream of my youth that I once buried. And now, reborn, I let it fly. When the plane touched down in Seattle, my heart raced like a young girl going away for the first time. I peered out the window and saw stretch after stretch of green forest, mountains veiled in mist, and a wide sky that seemed to open its arms to me. I stood up on trembling legs, clutching my purse. Inside it, Daniel's letter and the white chrysanthemums, now a little limp. And then, as I stepped out through the gate, there he was. Richard Lawson. His hair was white now, his shoulders not as broad as they once were, but his smile, oh, that smile, was warm and familiar as ever. In his hand, he held a bouquet of yellow roses, bright as sunlight. The moment our eyes met, all the years between us seemed to melt away. There were two old people standing there, but our hearts beat young. He came forward, handed me the roses, and hugged me, an embrace both strange and deeply known. "Evelyn, you are even more beautiful than I remember," he whispered. I laughed, tears prickling at my eyes. "Richard, after 40 years, you still know how to make a woman blush." Over the next days, Richard took me everywhere. In the mornings, we drove along the coastal roads, and then, there it was before me. The Pacific, vast and blue, the white-edged waves rolling in. I stood on the sand, breath held, tears falling. This is the first time in my life I've seen the ocean," I choked out. Richard squeezed my hand. His eyes shone, too. "I promised I'd show you," he said. Late by 40 years, but I kept my promise. In the evenings, he brought me to his home, a wooden house on a hill overlooking the sea, the garden full of marigolds and roses. And the thing that surprised me most, his 3 grown children, Andrew, Clara, and young Sophia, came to meet me at the door. There was no awkwardness, no judgment. They embraced me, smiled with real warmth. Andrew, the eldest, shook my hand and said, "Dad has talked about you for years. We're finally meeting the woman who made him young once." Clara hugged me tightly and whispered, "Please stay as long as you like." He hasn't smiled like this since Mom passed. And Sophia, the youngest, her eyes bright, looked at me with such feeling. Since Mom died, Dad closed up. No one could pull him out of that shell. But now, seeing him smile when he talks about you, we know. You're what he needed. Hearing that, my chest fluttered with both joy and shyness. I had never expected such a welcome. I was only a widow, older and scarred by life. Yet in this foreign place, I felt, for the first time in a long while, like I had come home. Richard arranged for me to stay in a room with a window facing the ocean. Mornings, I would sit on the porch and listen to the waves and breathe the salty air. At noon, we'd go to the market for fresh fish and green vegetables and cook together. He told me about his life, the years building a company, the failures, the successes. I told him mine. Nights at the sewing machine, the years raising a child, the days I cried because I was looked down upon. He listened, never interrupting or judging, only taking my hand and saying, "Evelyn, you have worked too hard. Now let the rest of your life be for you." There were evenings when we sat together on the wooden chairs out on the porch, glasses of wine in hand, the sunset blazing across the horizon and staining the ocean red. Richard turned toward me, his eyes alight. "I'm not a businessman, not a retired engineer, not the father of 3 grown children. I'm just Richard, the man who has never forgotten Evelyn for 40 years. Hearing those words, my heart trembled like that of the 20-year-old girl I once was. I had never imagined that at 70 I could still hear words like these. Then one night after dinner, Richard looked at me, his voice slow but steady. "Evelyn, I know it may seem too soon, but I need to say this. I don't want you here for just a month and then gone. I'm not asking for marriage, not binding you to anything. I only hope you'll give us a chance. Move to Seattle. Stay. Let's build something beautiful, even if it comes in the twilight of our lives." I froze, his words stirring a storm inside me. I thought of Daniel, of the letter he wrote, the line he left me. "Mom, fly high." I thought of the tears I shed as I read, "You are the quiet hero of my life." And now, before me stood a man offering a new future, a second love. Not the reckless fire of youth, but the deep understanding of age. I took Richard's hand, tears spilling down my cheeks. "Can you give me time? I've spent my whole life living for others. To live for myself, even now, I still feel afraid, still hesitate. But in my heart, I know. This is the chance I've waited for these 70 years. Richard smiled and held my hand tighter. "I'll wait, as long as it takes." That night, I sat by the window, listening to the waves breaking on the shore, the wind whispering through the garden of flowers. And softly to myself, I murmured, "Evelyn Harper, your son told you to fly high. These are the wings life has finally given you." Time moved faster than I could have imagined. From the moment I set foot in Seattle, living in that wooden house overlooking the ocean with Richard, every morning felt like a new breath of youth. I was no longer the bent, weary woman who existed only to sacrifice, to carry the weight of others on her shoulders. I learned how to laugh again, how to stroll peacefully along the shoreline, how to receive love, gentle, steady love. After 70 long years, what gave me the deepest peace, though, was Daniel. Since the day at the airport, he began to change. He worked hard at the cleaning company, then moved on to a grocery store, working while continuing his online accounting courses. No more complaints, no more late-night calls begging for help. Instead, once a week, he sent me a short email sharing small victories. "Mom, today I was praised for finishing my shift faster than before." Or, "Mom, I just completed my first course on accounting principles." To me, those words were worth more than gold. They were proof that my son had finally learned to walk on his own 2 feet. Once, Daniel called me on video, his voice calm and grounded. "Mom, I think I understand now. You said you lived your whole life for others and forgot yourself. I did the same. I lived off you, made you a shadow of my own life. Now I want to live for real. Don't worry about me anymore. Live the rest of your life the way you want. I support you with all my heart." His eyes glistened with tears as he said it, and I could barely speak through the lump in my throat. I knew then my son had truly grown up. And Melissa, well, her story resolved itself quickly. After I left, she stayed with Daniel for a few more months. But when she realized her husband no longer had a high-paying job, no longer had anyone to bankroll their life, her tune changed. One day, Daniel called, his voice strangely steady. "Mom, Melissa moved out. She's with a businessman in his 60s. Wealthy, flashy, the kind who loves to show off. It hurts a little, but honestly, I feel lighter. I see now she never wanted a family. She only wanted money and status." I went quiet for a moment, then sighed. Some people are born only to admire their own reflection in the mirror, never to look down at anyone else. For Daniel, losing Melissa was, in truth, liberation. As for me, I began a new life. I moved fully to Seattle, carrying only a few keepsakes: a family photo frame, my old journal, and the letter where Daniel called me his silent hero. The day I set my suitcase down in the room beside Richard's, I smiled to myself and whispered, "This is home. At last, this is truly home." And then came something neither Richard nor I expected. His children were the ones who said it first. "Dad, Evelyn makes you happy. Marry her so we can call her Mom." I froze, but Richard took my hand, his eyes steady with resolve. "Evelyn, I want the rest of my life tied to yours. No grand gestures, no luxury. Just one promise here by the sea." So one early morning, with the sun just rising, we held a small wedding on the beach. No elaborate gown, no loud guests, just Richard, me, his 3 children, and Daniel. I wore a simple pale blue dress. Richard wore a gray suit, his hands trembling as he slid a plain silver ring onto my finger. The ocean waves whispered against the shore, as if bearing witness. Daniel stood nearby, holding a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. He wept through the whole ceremony, not out of sorrow, but from joy. He held my hand and whispered, "Mom, I've never seen you look so beautiful." I smiled through tears, my voice carried by the wind. "My son, today I am truly myself." In that moment, I realized the insult in that old kitchen was not a curse, but a gift of fate. Without those cruel words, "You're not even half the woman my mother is," I might have stayed trapped in endless sacrifice and silent suffering. It was that very humiliation that woke me up, pushed me to rise, to reclaim myself, and finally, to soar high enough to touch happiness. Now, each morning I walk the shoreline with Richard. Each evening we sit watching the sunset. Each night we gather around the table with family. My heart feels light, no longer burdened. I see clearly now, it is never too late to begin again. If anyone asks me the greatest lesson of my life, I will answer, don't live your whole life only for others and forget yourself. Remember, even in the twilight of life, you still have the right to be loved, the right to dream, the right to be happy. And if life gives you a second chance at happiness, will you be brave enough to take it? Because it is never too late to start again. Thank you for listening to my story today. I wish you and your family peace, health, and happiness. Please subscribe to the channel and walk with us in the videos yet to come.